Oh, he's playing catch up. Okay. I'm waiting to see it. Oh. Okay, we are going live now.
Oh, he's playing catch up. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us. I have Laura Hayes here, and she will be talking about implementing writing strategies with AAC. So I will turn off my camera and turn it over to her right now. Thank you, Laura, for presenting with us today.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I am sure most of you are aware we've been having some technical difficulties. So it is Tuesday, and everyone knows it's Technology Tuesday. So that means that we're going to have technical issues, but hopefully we will not have any for the duration. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and hope that the rest of our session is without issue. So I'm going to go ahead and share, and then we're going to present. And oops, of course, jump up to the top. Okay, so today, for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about how we can do integration of AAC and writing. My quick disclosures are that I am an employee of Special School District of St. Louis County. Shout out to everyone there that is watching today. And I do get a salary for working there. I have no other disclosures to reveal. As far as objectives, very quickly, I want you guys to be able to define and provide an example, at least two examples of what an alternative pencil is, be able to describe the stages of writing development and two examples of how AAC can support those stages, be able to provide at least two examples of integrative written expression activities that you can use your AAC system within to help your students or your children. Let's talk about the importance of writing. I am sure every single one of you has used a component, if not all of these components today. You've probably texted, you probably logged in. Hopefully you didn't have any issues logging in. You may have logged into your social media, done out a tweet. I was onto YouTube earlier. You may have Google searched, is Starbucks open? What time does Starbucks open? What do I need to get through my day? We've all used writing in some capacity today, if nothing else than to get into our email, write out something to a quick person and or get into the conference. We all use writing throughout our day. What is our goal for our kiddos that use AAC? And what is our goal for everyone? Our goal is that anyone and everyone can be a proficient writer. So being able to use and independently write whatever their interests are for a variety of functional purposes. When we look at the development of writing, there are four main areas that we're going to look at today. There's lots of different research and models as far as the development of writing, but I really go to these four because they go in a nice systematic way that you can support written expression utilizing AAC in the classroom and at home. So we're going to talk about those today. But what we find is that individuals with disabilities, they struggle with some of these areas because we know from research that they have decreased exposure to and difficulties with phonology concepts. They have decreased accommodations to systematic instruction. They have increased error in mechanics of writing. They have increased redundancies and decreased syntactic variety. And that's true both in written expression and with the research that goes alongside of what language is utilized in AAC systems. We know that semantic and syntactic variety is limited. They have the difficulties with motor demands necessary for writing. They're not going to have that tripod grasp. They're not going to be able to hold a pencil like you or I would. And then they also have difficulties maintaining story structure, the pragmatics of writing, the different components of what is in an exposition. That is what research tells us. But in thinking about what research tells us about individuals with disabilities, there's a lot of myths that go around AAC and writing. What do those myths look like? Just a few of them that Sturm investigated in 2003. They found that people thought that there's a lot of prerequisites as far as literacy skills that must be required before you can expose someone to writing and learning opportunities. Writing skills have to be taught in isolated tasks. Many of you, I'm not going to age myself here, but many of you probably remember grade school or elementary school where you were taught how to write on a piece of paper, lined paper. Some of you even maybe learned cursive alongside me, and they were isolated tasks though. There were worksheets, maybe even some grammar lessons. It was not integrated into different lessons and activities. So that is the mindset of many when looking at how we teach writing to somebody that has complex communication needs. Conventional writing is not possible. I see this one a lot, that people just have this myth that kids cannot learn writing in a functional or formal way because they use AAC, because they learn differently and they have a different language. And that is absolutely not true. We're going to talk about different ways that we can support them today. But if nothing else, if you take nothing else away from my presentation today, please know that all of our kids have the potential and the capacity to learn and be an independent writer. Another big one is that spoken communication is not needed during writing. And we're going to talk about all of the different areas that are integrative when looking at language and looking at written expression, as well as oral communication, speaking with an speech generating device. And then another big one that I necessarily didn't know about when I was first learning about AAC was that symbol writing activities that we often use for our kiddos with symbol-based communication systems, they allow for a natural transition into conventional writing. And we're going to talk about, in a little bit, we're going to talk about the pros and cons and the benefits of what symbol-based writing can give us, and then what graphophonemic writing can give us as well. So what does our little niche in St. Louis, Missouri look like? So we, as an AT and AAC team, support over 1,000 students across 22 districts. We support them from kindergarten through graduation, so anyone from 5 to 21 years of age. And we have a very wide range of tools that we implement simultaneously, and we use the SET framework from Joy Zabala. We use everything from low-tech, think EMC, POD, low-tech communication boards, core boards. We use everything from low-tech all the way up to high-tech. Our AT team recommends Read, Write, Google, Clicker, PixWriter. We utilize SGDs across all speech. I keep saying SGDs, I mean speech generating devices, across all companies. So PRC, Saltillo, Tobii Dynavox, Forbes, Crick. We utilize all of it at Tame and Company. But in doing that, because we have such a plethora of devices and we have these tools for staff, we often hear feedback that they don't have enough training or they're feeling overwhelmed. The feeling of overwhelmedness, I think, has probably has increased since COVID, and we're now training and teaching virtually. But because of that feeling of overwhelmedness and not feeling comfortable or at an expert level, we don't see devices in use throughout the day. There's a lot of expectations using core curriculum and teaching all of these different programs and having these students demonstrate knowledge. So we often see these complex AAC systems get put to the wayside. I'm hoping a lot of you are nodding at home saying, yes, this is exactly what we see and feel too. So along that approach, we see that they are using a core approach. We have been instilling that in our teams, but we don't always see that carryover to written expression and throughout the day. It might be limited to just a calendar activity or just with speech therapy. And we want that to go and correspond, and we want it to be streamlined across all activities across their day and definitely across home. So along those same lines, when we see the device put to the wayside, we will also even see that some of our staff are scribing. And when I say scribing, meaning that they're writing for our students. And that is maybe one of my pet peeves, because when we see scribing, we often see what the staff or and communication partner thinks that the student wants to say versus what the student is actually trying to say. And alongside of all of that is just those limited exposure to graphemes. And if we don't have the exposure to graphemes and phonemes, then we really are putting a big barrier in front of our students so that they aren't able to learn how to independently read and write. So solution-wise, what do we do? our students need to receive explicit and systematic instruction on both mechanics and those process-oriented skills using a streamlined approach. I was thinking about this the other day and how most of us don't even use pencils, right? We all use alternative keyboards. We all use an alternative form of writing. Very few of us even use pencils. I was thinking about the doc from Back to the Future and how he said roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. And I was thinking, where we're going, we don't even need pencils. We really just need to think how we're going to use technology to integrate and streamline these processes so our kids know that this is going to get them somewhere. So that's my powerful message, and we're going to drill that home today. But when we use alternative pencils, we use keyboards, right? An alternative pencil is defined and was created from the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. And it's defined as anything that provides someone with access to all 26 letters of the alphabet for use in writing. Again, going back to that myth, someone does not need to know how to independently read or to spell to begin to learn and use an alternative pencil. I think back about when I was a kid, and some of you may have been typewriters, some of you may have been texting. Oh gosh, I'm aging myself. But for me, it was using a big old honky computer keyboard, and I would just pretend that I was working and using that, and I was getting those exposure to those letters and keyboard. A few examples that you may see. Kelly Fauner is going to do a wonderful presentation just after me. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here about alternative pencils, but it can be a speech generating device. It can be a low-tech alphabet board. It can be flip books. There's a really great one on Teachers Pay Teachers called the Writing Buddy. I'll put that link in my Google site that I'll have the link to at the end of the presentation. There's iGaze and eTran alphabet boards. You can see an example here at the bottom. That's a quadrant board for iGaze that's used for communication partners so that they can spell, like I mentioned earlier, keyboards, and then just letter manipulatives. They can be foam, magnetic, any kind of kinesthetic feedback. So when we think about those examples and how we can give an access to an alternative keyboard, we really have to start thinking about how to build processes that streamline our workflow. And why I like this quote from Mark Mason is that it talks about making it easier for everyone. So when I talk about making it easier, and I talk about telling staff, okay, it's not just one more thing that we're going to talk about here. We're really going to streamline your workflow so it's easier for you, but it's also easier for the student. So the student can focus less on the cognitive load that is learning all these activities. And then by making the work easier, we're going to make the results more reliable. So you can kind of dive into where's my student functioning and what do I need to tweak and try differently at this level so that they can be successful. Looking at the skills required for writing, it's a big, long list. We break it down into mechanics and then the process itself. So most people, when you think of writing, you often go to the mechanics side. Do we understand what letters and graphemes are? Can we spell? What does the vocabulary look like? Do we know the words? What does the syntax and sentence structure look like? And what's our punctuation? Are we putting that period and comma and quotation, all those quotation marks, all of those things in our writing? But equally important is the process of writing. The comprehension, the memory and the recall, the ability to encode what we're thinking, decoding for reading is really important for that beginning stage, and we're going to talk about that. But the ability to encode and have the memory to do that is hugely important for our kiddos learning. The ability to organize and plan how to write. We talked about how they have difficulty with compiling story structure and staying within that context that we want them in. So being able to plan and organize their thoughts for the purpose and the genre that they're writing is really, really important. And then the conventions alongside that. We write differently for an email than we do for a research paper. And then being able to edit and monitor our own work. When we think about all of these skills, I also want you guys to be thinking throughout the presentation about how our AAC systems are set up. And how they help facilitate some of these different areas. So thinking about word prediction, sentence prediction, punctuation, spell check, all of those things, writing templates, categories, planning, recall, all of those are so important. And thinking about how the system is set up, as well as how we can help facilitate that in the systems and build. We know that they're changing systems every single day. I'm sure I have an update on my PRC and Saltillo devices waiting for me, because I just feel like they run those off on Tuesdays. But if you know that they're doing updates, like, you know that it's always changing. So thinking about how those changes can benefit and help streamline some of these processes for our students. Okay, so we talked a lot about the relationship, but this chart kind of brings it home for me. It talks about how communication, writing, listening, and reading all come together, and they all impact one another. So reading is that first step for print awareness. It builds the capacity for all these other areas. Communication, listening, and reading then also provide motivation and meaning and context and feedback for what writing gives us. Writing increases interest in letters and words for both reading and communication. They all impact one another. For us, we have to think about advancing all the areas simultaneously so that we're supporting students' development. This is a really great dimensional chart that looks at how to build the dimensions of reading and writing, all the way from graphophonemic up through pragmatics and conventions. Why I like it is because I think that this lays it out in a way that's easily absorbable for us, so that we can teach it to our kiddos. This goes back to thinking about, okay, what components, where do we see graphophonemic and orthographic and lexical components embedded in our speech generating devices? Do they have a phonics page? Do they have word and sentence prediction built in? Have we opened those up? Have we even opened the keyboard page for some of our students? That is something I highly encourage you, if you haven't already done, to just allow available for a student to explore. And we'll talk about why that's important in a second. So I had the best intentions of getting some wonderful student videos of emergent writing, because so many of our schools are doing such a good job now that we're diving into this. And then COVID hit. So I feel like that's the running punchline. And then COVID hit. So instead, you guys get to see some rare glimpses into my son, Wesley, and he is officially 2. So you're going to get to see him and his exploration in writing with both just without a speech generating device and with a speech generating device. But why I really like these videos and why I decided to share them was because he's cute. That's one of the reasons, but also because he is showing so many of the characteristics that we see with some of our kiddos that have complex bodies, and what their initial emerging skills in writing can look like. So we'll watch the first video, fingers crossed that my technology works. And this is just without a speech generating device. So watch some of the things that he does, and then we're going to talk about what those characteristics can look like. Oops. There we go. Hey, Wes, watch this. I'm going to put a letter up on the board.
I do. Ta-da! Some bird.
Letter on the board. What letter is that?
Yes. O.
That is an O, and this is a G for G.
Ta-da! W.
So many letters.
Yeah. It's Y.
I.
I. It's rainbow.
It looks a little like a rainbow. If you turn it this way, it's a C for C. Okay. And this one, again, is just with a speech generating device. Pay particular attention to what he does with the keyboard and Well, I'll let you watch it and you'll see there's a lot of slapping and exploration. What are you writing? What if we go here? Type some more. Type W-E-S. What'd you spell?
W. E.
I like how you wrote M, and then look, we can say it all together. And awesome! That's so silly. What a fun word.
It worked.
Okay, so why I like those videos, again, is because he is showing some emergent writing characteristics. Interestingly, I didn't give a lot of prompts when I just showed him the communication device. He wasn't getting the feedback that he liked, and you saw that he went down to the keyboard so he could have increased feedback tactily. You also saw that he would say a letter that wasn't necessarily the letter that he was typing, so the recognition wasn't there, but he had his favorite letters. We don't always get to see that with our kids with AAC because they aren't showing us that, but doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't absorbing it. So when they're at this level, you know, a lot of kiddos too, they get to scribble, they get to make picture representation through their scribbles, but we don't get to see that with kiddos that have complex bodies because they aren't able to show that. But it doesn't mean that it isn't being absorbed and that that exposure isn't crucial for them to get to the next level. So that first level is literacy and written language features, that ability to have print awareness. What can this look like for kiddos at this level? Like Wes, very disinterested, distracted, behavioral responses, slapping at the keys, perseverating on a certain key. What does this do? I also call this the squirrel stage, where it's like you're trying to teach them an activity and then it's squirrel. So they have very limited attention span and then they might come back. But as you saw with Wes, it doesn't mean that it wasn't for anything. He still got something out of that activity. Very random activations. These are the kiddos that are going to have symbolic drawings used for meanings over graphemes. So again, for kiddos with AAC, you may not see that, but for kiddos with complex bodies, I often encourage my OTs just to get a switch and connect it to a scribble-based writing utensil. They have some really good art activities that can be connected to switch platforms so that they can scribble and draw and have some representation and meaning, because that's so such a crucial element and important part of the beginning stages of writing. And then, like I said, pattern randomization. So you might have some favorite letters. You might start to see that they frequently go to certain aspects of the board or the layout that you have in front of them. Those would all be things that you would start to see. For our kiddos at this level, we often sometimes see these staff that are discouraging use of that because it's random, right? So how are they getting any language? This doesn't mean anything, but it is an important and crucial part to the learning process of writing and literacy. So try to go back and tell your staff and your families that it is important. It's okay if they explore. We can support that and shape that. What can we do? We can allow them to have scribbling time. We can allow them to have that time to have inventive spelling, write in WESM, see what it gets them, make the funny words, and give that partner feedback of, okay, this is what you said. I love this. This is great. This can start your name. This can be an animal. Giving them that ability, making it errorless, but give them the feedback. So along those same lines, having graphic organizers where they're able to fill it in. You can do that at a picture-based level or with graphemes. So you can have a graphic organization picture so that they can have different circles and talk about favorite animals and write the letters of their favorite animals. And then you can shape that. So if they put in K or they put in a picture of a koala, then all the better. If they put in a picture of a hamburger, again, all the better, because you can start to give them feedback for that. Sharing those literacy activities, if you aren't already doing shared reading where you are doing aided language input and modeling on their device and using supported learning strategies there, please do that, because it does correspond, as we talked about earlier, with early writing. A few that I really like are Mad Libs, again, because it's errorless and they can pretty much put anything down. And it's funny and it's right and it gets giggles out of everybody, myself included. And then journaling with pictured supports. There are many templates out there, and I put a few of them on the Google site, but journaling with pictured supports so that they're getting errorless feedback. And then another great one is just Wordle, because you can pretty much put anything in there and you see what you're writing. You see the visual representation of what you've done. And Wordle is just a free website for those of you guys who haven't tapped into it, but it's also on my Google site for reference. So we're going to watch Owen and his para, and I just want you guys to see what emergent writing can look like in action. And again, you're going to see, now that you've seen what the characteristics can look like and you've seen what some of the activities and suggestions are, you might have a different view of what his actions in this activity represent. So let's take a look and see, let's see Owen. Oh, come on, technology.
Pick a letter. Okay, good job. Put Q back. Owen, can you pick another letter? Let's keep writing. Good job. Here, Owen. Q. Q. You want to see a quail, huh? You're saying Q a lot. Keep writing. J again. Do you want to see something that jumps? J. K. You might see a koala. Koala. Oh, I'll get that. Keep writing.
Okay, so again, might have been pattern randomization at that point, but he definitely had some favorite letters. One of the things that in an ideal world that we would do is when she was giving him that partner feedback of koala and what those letters could represent on his device, is allowing him to see that, kind of pulling in that triangle of aided language input and saying, this is what you're saying. Every student is different. And so if I don't know Owen personally, but it could be that that might have overwhelmed him. And she was really just trying to get him to have the ability to manipulate the alternative pencil that she provided. So just know that in an ideal situation, we would also want them to be able to see what their writing looks like on their speech generating device as we're modeling it and giving them that shaped feedback. Okay, so throughout all of these different levels, I'm going to give you guys a couple strategies that you can take back to your home base and or recommend to families. And know that all of these strategies can be used almost interchangeably at any point throughout the levels of writing abilities. But where I've kind of put them in the presentation is just where I use them the most for students at that level. So the first one is a pretty well-known one called predictable chart writing, started through Cunningham in ~79, but it's a multi-step approach to structured writing that looks at language skills across a group over 5 days, where you're modeling structured support in sentences for students to combine one or two more words so they can make a sentence at the level that they need. And at the language level that they're functioning at. So they can make it as complex or as simple as they can. It's really, really nice when your students are functioning at different levels. What does it look like? So on the first day, you're going to write a chart as a group. You can see an example, what I like for snack, what you would write as a group. Each person writes their own sentence. On day 2, you would reread those sentences. On day 3, you physically practice with cutting up the sentences and manipulating them. On day 4, you do something called be the sentence, and that you're going to see an example of in a second, but you have the ability to find and locate those words on your speech generating device, or have a single switch where it populates that for you so that you are able to be the sentence yourself. And then 5, my favorite day, is the day where you get to make a book. So you have something to take home and show. And again, if I can't hit that home enough, it is so important to have something to represent what you've done so that our children are able to see their writing examples. So the first one, writing a chart as a group, I love this video because of the communication partners and how they interact with both the young girl using her system, as well as the other kids in the classroom, because she is in a gen ed classroom. So you can see they scaffold and shift how they support the students based off of where their level is. So let's watch.
So be thinking about what you want to put in your sentence, okay? So we're going to start with what number do we start with? Kindergarten eyes? Dylan, right here. I need your eyes here. Glue it on me. Thank you. Number 1. Teresa, are you ready with your idea? One what? One sink. Good job. Kindergartners, can you help me spell the word one, please? O-N-E. I have one sink. Ink. Okay. I have one sink. Teresa, is that your sentence? Are you done? Yes? Are you done? Yes, thank you. Okay, so that's Teresa's sentence. Nice job, Teresa.
Okay. So again, I just love the timing. I love the patience. I love the feedback. It's a great example of how you can begin to write a chart as a group on day 1. On day 4, this is a really nice example of how you can be the sentence. And so all these videos have been kind of cut down so that you, just for timing's sake. So know that too, on the Google site, you can go back and watch the full videos if you want more info on them. So this is day 4. This is be the sentence with a different group of kiddos.
Now we're going to have a go at being the sentence. Let's have a look at our words. We've got our first word here. Do. Do. Can you see do is our first word in our sentence, and it has a capital D. Because when you start a sentence, it always starts with a capital D. Can you find do? Well, you've come into the letters. Find me that capital D. Excellent. D. Oh, I can hear a D from over there too. D. Okay, now if we go back, I wonder if you can find do on the home page. Do. No? D. I'll show you on mine. Do. Do. Can you find do on your home page? Want. Can you find do? Do. Yeah, our first word is do. Do. Wants to do. Excellent. Chloe, what did that say? Do. Do.
So for time's sake, we're going to keep going, but know that they do continue throughout the whole sentence, and each student has the opportunity to complete their sentence as they personalized it from day 1. So when we think about vocabulary in emergent writing, I love this research that came out from Clendon, Sturm, and Callie in 2004. They took 124 kindergarten students and they looked and transcribed the writing samples that those students produced. And what you can notice about all of those writing samples, the most frequently used 2-word phrases, most of them are core-based. So when you're thinking about where to start with your kids that are using AAC, these would be ones I would highly encourage you to use because they're core-based. They're stemming from kiddos that are typically developing, and they're going to give you a lot of bang for buck. They're also quite errorless, right? I like a lot of things. I like coffee. I like alcoholic beverages. I like sleep. I like animals. I like my son. I like my husband most of the time. All of these things are things that I like, right? It's very open-ended, fairly errorless when we're filling out these writing samples. So it's diverse in nature. Thinking about how we can kind of look at our environments, engineer the environment differently. Going back to some of the slide I talked about where we're giving suggestions about what to do, what activities to do. When we're doing some of those activities like reading, like writing, when we're doing those errorless graphic organizations, giving low-tech pathway examples. So I like to drink coffee. If you have an editing software, if you have the ability to make visual representation to match your students, whether it be Unity, Symbol Sticks, Board Maker, whatever that visual representation is, having low-tech pathway examples and modeling those throughout and making it visual throughout the environment is really, really important. Considering highlighting or color coding on your systems temporarily. I say temporarily because people can get kind of crazy, and the majority of systems are research-based and color-coded. So you don't want to take away from that, but you can see in the students' device below, I did highlight temporarily, I like drink, to give them that feedback that was what we were focusing on that week. And then Gil Van Tatenhoff really talks a lot about descriptive versus referential teaching. So when you're providing students opportunities at this level, you really want to be thinking about leaving it open-ended and giving them the ability to describe what they're talking about versus having these close-ended one-time responses that are very limited in scope. Thinking iceberg versus cold water, thinking hot drink versus Starbucks soy latte. Also thinking about using repetition, repeated lines, because again, you're going to get more feedback. They're going to be able to have peer models. That's where that predictable chart writing comes in. Everyone has the same sentence starter. So I like, I read, I want, I can. Those are all really important because you're going to get that repeated line and repeated exposure. And then just supports for visual word order and syntax. Some of that is built into some of our speech generating devices, but thinking about when you're building low tech supports and writing activities to kind of keep that consistency. So keeping the color coding the same, keeping those supports the same. And then I kind of talked a lot about this first part because I feel like the first part is the hardest part, right? If you believe you can, you're really halfway there, more than halfway there. If you can believe that your kids have the potential and they start to show that potential, the world opens up and staff and families open up because they can see that they really have the potential to learn and show what they know. So the second phase, once we get past that, knowing that these stages aren't a true hierarchy, like you're going to flow just like we flow with literacy and language, but knowing that the next stage is going really heavily more into those graphemes and phonemic awareness. So these kiddos, they're still having some of that pattern randomization, but they're going to go to the keyboard because they've been exposed to it. They want to practice spelling. They have their favorite letters. My kiddo's favorite letter right now is O. I didn't specifically teach him O. That's just his favorite letter. Do you know what your kiddo's favorite letters are? Try to find out. Increased attention to models and prompters. So again, the more support they see, the more they're going to want to do that. They may even point out those letters in literacy activities or when they see their name or when they see print around the environment. And then that idea of inventive spelling. It could even be just the first letter. So ice cream is the example I gave here, but it could just be the first letter or it could be their favorite letter again. But they might point to it and say, oh, orange. And that's how they spelled orange. That's great. That is a characteristic of this level. But this is a really important level when we think about speech generating devices because different speech generating devices have different layouts and have different considerations. And we have to take into consideration what our kiddos with complex bodies and complex communication needs need on a speech generating device. What does research tell us? Research tells us that we're actually supposed to be teaching the sounds first and the letter names later. that was a revelation for me as a therapist, because I would often go to the alphabet, what letters of the alphabet. But in writing development and considerations for writing development, we really want to be teaching those phonemic sounds, because that is how we spell, that is how we learn both literacy and writing. The suggested word order is the lowercase first, and then I'm not going to read through all of those, but starts with A, ends with Q. As far as with an AAC device, considerations that I just kind of want you guys to be thinking about. What does your system keyboard look like for your child or your student? Is it a QWERTY keyboard? Is it an alphabetic keyboard? If you're joining us from the UK, I studied there for a while, and so that completely threw me because their keyboard is just different enough to give me a headache. So knowing that there are different keyboard styles and knowing that we want to support our kiddos from emergent levels all the way up to independence. So I personally don't like to use an A to Z keyboard for the majority of my kiddos that are on high-tech devices, because those, I know that a lot of systems out there will shift to QWERTY keyboard. Rather, what I would do to highlight things for these kiddos is I would temporarily hide or highlight keys on the QWERTY keyboard, like I've shown here with Wes, so that I can hide, or so I can show those and highlight those for the activity, and then I can open it back up, and those keys, just like the keys on a keyboard, stay in the same place, so you're not losing the motor plan. But there are other keyboards that you have, or other alphabetic boards that you have. Specifically, the one I highlighted here was the one used in a pod system for someone that's using partner assisted scanning. And when we look at partner assisted scanning, we're looking at somebody who needs the support of a communication partner by scanning through their choices. And this is laid out differently, not in a QWERTY style, because it's laid out by frequency, so that more frequent letters are more accessible earlier in the scan for those students. Again, some of these alternative pencil examples Kelly is going to talk about, so we're not going to dive too much into that. But know that there are many different ones, and making sure that the keyboard style that you have supports your students, not just now, but as they grow. Oops, I wanted to mention one more thing. So the other thing to consider here too is, does your system have a phonetic keyboard or page? If it doesn't, look into seeing if you can download one from the developers. Some of them you can shift them and download them, or for example, I'm thinking PRC has one on their dedicated platforms, and I've put similar ones onto the app. And then just if it doesn't, kind of getting creative with creating one, so that the kiddos and children that you're supporting have the ability to hear what phonetic sounds sound like. So this is just one example that PRC has. Okay, so what can we do for the kiddos that are at this stage? Going beyond just print awareness, having them work on identification, signing in, signing out, work assignments, classroom signs and labels, having them manipulate those throughout the day. Giving them lists and letter gameplay, so having them go on scavenger hunts for things around the room, you know, something that starts with the letter H, playing Hangman, Wheel of Fortune, all of those letter games where it's not completely errorless, but they are getting feedback in a meaningful contextual way. Rhyming activities and books. We're knee deep into this as with my 2-year-old. We do a lot of bingo. Superwise, a favorite of ours. Dr. Seuss. Enchanted Learning has a ton of great manipulatable activities on their website, which I included on my Google site. Rhythmic clapping, because we know that music and communication and language also support one another. So thinking of those activities. Using a word wall. So here's a great example from a classroom where, as they've learned different words throughout the year, they're highlighting those so that they're continually in the student's dictionary and in their site. And then, as I mentioned, using those phonemic pages on the AAC systems. So when I talk about phonemic awareness, there's many different ways to kind of build your phonemic skills. here's a list of them, and I've included activities that go along with each of these on the Google site. I promise I'm going to give that at the end of my presentation. So if you don't have that from the resources shared from the cloud, it's there, but it's also in the presentation. And then the strategy for this one, again, it can be translated to other levels, but it's the idea to talk, write, and talk again. So the student at this point gets to build what they're going to talk about a little bit. So you allow them to choose the topic, to choose what they want to write a sentence about. Then you have the ability as a communication partner to shape that by modeling on the communication device. So that's the shared talking. When you write about the topic, you are, for this level, more likely going to leave the last word or the highlighted word that you want them to practice phonemes and graphemes for blank. And then you would practice that simple word with them and spelling it out phonetically. Then after they've shared out that sentence, you are going to share that writing out by demonstrating knowledge by either rereading it, sharing it with a communication partner, sending it home to show their writing to family, et cetera, et cetera. This is, again, Wes is making a replay here. We're just working on a quick phonetic activity for his name. First letter of our name is
E.
Let's find the W.
W.
Awesome. Next letter is E. Last letter is, like a snake, S.
S.
I finished.
You did it!
I finished.
All together we have W,
S.
E, S, spells.
West.
West.
Okay, so we only have about 10 minutes left. We started a little bit late because of our issues, so we're just going to keep on chugging along. But the third level and idea is that we're going to be working on these basic processes, so planning and revising text and mechanics. So being able to show those convention mechanical things in writing, such as punctuation, capitalization, constructing some phrases and sentences using syntax, and writing some of those processes that support communication versus partner-led discussions and independent construction of their own thoughts and ideas. Composing basic emails, making lists, writing, summarizing books, journaling, memoir books. Another favorite one of mine is writing comic book or movie captions. Kids love that. Sending postcards and letters. It's a little bit of a dying art, but you can do it electronically. You can have pen pals. Using prediction and word sentence prediction tools, and then supportive writing templates. There are some really great ones out there. I've included some videos for device-specific ones on the website because we didn't have time to kind of go into that today, and I didn't want to narrow it too much, but I wanted to give you guys some examples of supporting writing templates that are built into our PRC, our Saltillo devices, Tobii Dynavox, and so those are all on the website. When we look at this level, there's a lot of discussion about pictures versus text, right? How do we lay out our writing activities? Because there is a difference. When we're using pictures to write, they decrease the difficulty of the text. They support understanding of meaning and sight word recognition. They are supportive for those hyperlexic students. And I really encourage you, if you have someone who's hyperlexic, who can read text but doesn't infer meaning, just to make sure that you are giving picture supports. And then it's going to be easier for them to demonstrate their knowledge using this form. But text is also important because pictures can be distracting to the graphemes and to the word itself. It has also, research been shown to be confusing because it's abstract. You've got morphological rules, syntax. Words have two different semantical meanings. And so if there's only one picture to support it, what does that mean? Orange is a great example of it. Where do you find that on a PRC device? It's only in one spot. But the biggest thing that I go to is that you have to have the presence of print to have an ear print and learn efficiency for those sounds and how they blend together. That is the only way that you can begin to encode your own language or your own words for writing. So my rule of thumb when I look at pictures versus text is, am I trying to demonstrate knowledge quickly? I will create that activity for pictures and picture supported. But if I'm trying to instill writing techniques and text support, then I will go towards learning graphemes and the text itself without picture support. Both are important for learning and making communication and writing strides. So it's a little bit of a dance, but know that both are important. I'm going to kind of breeze through this strategy just because we're running out of time. But this was a strategy created specifically for reading, but that I also have carried over to some writing. And this was created through Dennis and Horn in 2011. And it's the crowd strategy. These are different. They stand for different things. So you've got sentence stem or completion. So you start a sentence, preferably core-based language, and then you leave a blank at the end of the sentence. It can be repetitive, like our predictable writing strategy, or it can deviate a little bit. So these two examples deviate a little bit, but you still want that repetition and that familiarity so that the student can carry it over. So you might do about my day journaling every single day, so the student is getting that repetition. You still want to use motivating and familiar topics. So if your kiddos are using News to You, or they're doing memoir books about families, book reports, these are things you can kind of utilize this strategy within that activity. Recall, this is the R. Associated stories where you can transfer them to writing. You can use visual prompts and supports as needed. So this action image down here was a free download that you can practice to describe. And you can use, basically you just want to use this recall as an anchor, visualize an anchor. Anything that they have learned about or talked about, you want to extend that through recall. Open-ended questions, it kind of goes back to the descriptive teaching strategy. We want to be open-ended. We want to give them a lot of leeway to be successful and write, rather than giving them only one right referential answer. They don't have specific right or wrong answers, but you can support that within categorical folders in an AAC system. This is a great writing template on Saltillo's device, talking about families, where the student can put in their own picture and sentence and have that ability. So WH questions, it's a little self-explanatory, but know that there are supports out there to kind of hit all those different areas. And this is also where you can use graphic organizers to support that as well. Then distancing, this is where you're extrapolating things that you've learned, the familiar to the unknown, and you're able to do more prediction-based writing samples. So if you're reading a book, tell me about your favorite car or food or something you've made at home. So this is our example video. We have two videos. I'm going to try to fit them both in. She's using those structured supports and strategies to, she's written about them earlier in the week, and now she's going to give an oral report.
My name is Brittany. Many people in Africa do not have enough food.
Some kids in Africa did not eat breakfast. Lunch, today, what do Americans usually eat for breakfast and lunch?
For dinner, most kids in Africa eat some kind of porridge.
I'm going to stop that one just short because I want you guys to see another one of my students who did a book report, and it's pretty funny. So the last level is this idea that we have self-regulation of writing. We have the mechanics and syntax, and we're focusing on message delivery. We're focusing on how we use writing in different styles and different forms. So I'm going to write an email differently to my sister than I am to my boss. I'm going to use message efficiency and style and tools in my AAC system for functional use. A lot of exporting here. What can we do for these students? Have them do self-generated and their own editing. So joke books, comic books, greeting cards, have them make something along those lines. Full reviews of movies and favorite shows, academic papers. And then for some of our kiddos, work-life scenario walkthroughs. What would you form a work email to your boss? What would your doctor visit paperwork look like? So this is Kayla. She's doing her own generated book report as well that she has written. And it's just really cute. So we're going to hopefully get it in.
Selling is pink ribbon shoes. They are pink, comfortable, and have ribbons. They are affordable. Teenage girls will love them for pink. Class. We will give $2 to charity for every shoe sold. That is $4 per pair. Buy my shoes. They are the bomb.
Okay, so again, she's still working on where those lines fall as far as what writing should be appropriate, but it was a great sell, I thought. So time savers, resources, additional tips, AAC Language Lab, Tar Heel Reader, Core First Language software and lesson plans, using editing software on smartboards. If you haven't already, it's a great tool to use. We use them a lot, and all my staff say that it supports not only the student using AAC, it supports all the students in the classroom in learning writing, language organization, and literacy. So using all those expression tools on a high-tech device, again, I've given examples with video supports on my Google site. So please go to that if you want more information, because it is so specific, device specific, but using those phonic pages when available, using highlighting tools, story banking, and those exporting features. Here are a few examples, low tech and high tech, that we've done throughout the year. And then here's just my personal favorites. I truly, this is something that some of my students have said. So when I'm in pain, give me vodka and morphine. We had to work on appropriateness for that one. Another student, I have an emergency, chips. And my favorite is, I have a true thing, God makes some beautiful people, and I'm one of them. Fully independently generated and made me cry, because it's true. That is what we want for our students. We want them to be able to generate whatever they think and write that and share it with the world. So here's the review. Repetition, carry over, streamline your resources, use the AAC device as much as possible. Use those templates, create your own templates, give that structure in the device. Because if we think about AAC as a separate language, we have to recognize it takes hours. In the ASHA Leader, they had an article that talked about how when we give students that have English as a second language, we give them immersion, and hours and hours and hours it's required. We have to think of AAC in the same regards. So we have to streamline our learning plans so that the work is easier and the results are more reliable. I am so sorry. We started late and I have hit time. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer them. Here's the link from the Google site with more resources. Thank you guys for having me, and hope the rest of your day is jam-packed filled with lots more info.